All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to uncover the absolutely fascinating and frankly, kind of relentless microscopic battle happening inside our food every single day. We all take our pantries and refrigerators for granted, right? But the reality is, the exact moment food is harvested or processed, an invisible countdown begins. So today, we're unpacking the actual science of food shelf life. We'll draw directly from established food safety standards to see exactly how the industry keeps our food safe and why, eventually, things inevitably go bad. It all starts with a question you've probably pondered while, cleaning out your kitchen cabinets. Why does a perfectly good biscuit go horribly stale and soft in just a few days, but a can of beans can sit in the back of your cupboard for literal years and still be perfectly safe to eat? It's wild, right? Grounding ourselves in this relatable kitchen mystery is key, because as you'll see, extending shelf life is actually a highly calculated war against nature, biology, and chemistry. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, the nature of spoilage, and then the factors influencing shelf life. After that, we'll look at the HACCP safety system, processing and microorganism survival, the whole chilled storage dilemma, and finally, nutrient loss over time. Moving into Section 1, the nature of spoilage, the invisible battle begins. The harsh reality is that food is, at its core, naturally perishable. We totally know what the enemy looks like here. Bread gets horribly moldy. Those crunchy biscuits turn super stale and sad. And processed meats, yeah, they get that smelly, slimy texture. But these aren't just random unlucky events. They're highly specific biological and chemical changes happening as food is handled, stored, and just exposed to the world. Basically, it's nature trying to reclaim organic matter. And this spoilage clock ticks at drastically different speeds depending on what we're looking at. On the super fast end, raw meat and fish. Those spoil rapidly in mere hours to days. In the middle, we've got things like bread and biscuits, giving us a buffer of days to weeks. And then, way over on the far end, we have what the industry calls shelf-stable foods. Think retorted, highly processed, or very dry foods, where deterioration might not even show up for months or even years. The whole goal of food science is essentially pushing every single food item as far down this timeline as safely possible. That brings us to Section 2, Factors Influencing Shelf Life. Setting the battlefield. To fight back against spoilage, scientists have to divide the food's internal chemistry from its outside environment. On one side, we have intrinsic factors. These are literally built right into the food itself, things like its moisture content and its pH or acidity levels. On the other side are extrinsic factors. This is everything we put around the food, the specific packaging materials we choose, whether we vacuum seal it, the exact storage temperature. By deeply understanding these two distinct categories, food scientists can manipulate them to artificially extend shelf life. But, and this is a massive warning sign straight from the food safety standards, you have to be incredibly careful. If you alter a food's formulation or packaging just to squeeze out a few extra weeks of shelf life, you might inadvertently make it more susceptible to pathogenic microorganisms. It's the law of unintended consequences. You might swap the packaging to stop your bread from going stale, but actually, scratch that, you just accidentally created the perfect humid microenvironment for dangerous bacteria to thrive. So every single tweak has to be rigorously tested. All right, Section 3, the HACC safety system, the defense strategy. Let's talk about HACCP. It's a foundational acronym in the food industry, standing for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point. Think of this as a highly systematic, step-by-step review of the entire production line. Processors look at the ingredients, the final product, the packaging, and they identify exactly what biological hazards might pop up. Then they establish critical control points. These are specific steps, like a precise blast of heat, designed to prevent, eliminate, or reduce those hazards to an acceptable level. But you know what? Sometimes one control point just isn't enough, and that is where this genuinely fascinating concept comes into play: hurdle technology. Instead of relying on one massive intervention, which, let's be honest, might completely ruin the taste or texture of the food, processors build a literal microscopic obstacle course. They combine a series of smaller measures or hurdles that wouldn't actually be enough to stop bacteria on their own. But when forced to jump over hurdle after hurdle, the bacteria just become totally exhausted, their growth is inhibited, and the food stays safe. To see exactly how this builds in the real world, uncooked salami is basically the perfect example of hurdle technology in action. Salami isn't cooked with heat, so how on earth is it safe? Well, first, the processor rapidly develops a low pH, making the environment highly acidic. That is hurdle number one.
Second, they reduce the water content through rigorous drying, starving bacteria of the moisture they desperately need. Hurdle 2. Finally, they add inhibitory salts. Hurdle 3. Any bacteria that somehow survives the acid and the dryness is finally knocked out by the salt. It is just a beautifully engineered series of biological roadblocks.
Which leads us into Section 4, Processing and Microorganism Survival. The survivors. Okay, it's time to shatter a really common myth. Washing fresh produce or even pasteurizing food absolutely does not eliminate all microorganisms. Unless a food is retorted or gets ultra-high temperature, UHT, treatment, it just isn't completely sterile. A few microbes are always going to survive. Plus, if preservation techniques like fermenting or cold smoking are poorly controlled, they can actually backfire and increase the number of pathogens. And of course, even if you do everything absolutely perfectly, simple cross-contamination at the very end of the line can completely ruin your extended shelf life. To really understand these survivors, we have to look at the different threats. Now, fungi and mold spores might look absolutely gross growing on your bread, but they're actually pretty easily destroyed by appropriate heat processing. But contrast that with bacterial spores. These guys are the final bosses of food spoilage. Some pathogenic and spoilage bacteria produce spores that act like heavy-duty biological armor. They are extremely resistant to heat and can easily survive standard processing. So when food scientists are calculating shelf life, they have to heavily factor in the terrifying resilience of these specific spores. Next up, Section 5, the chilled storage dilemma, the Cold War. We all know the golden rule of the kitchen, right? If you want it to last, chuck it in the fridge. And it's true. Chilled storage is incredibly effective at extending shelf life because those low temperatures drastically slow down chemical changes and the growth rates of many molds, yeasts, and bacteria. It essentially hits the pause button on spoilage. But, and this is a massive but, the fridge is not an impenetrable magic shield. The crucial point here is that some of the most dangerous pathogenic bacteria are actually cold tolerant. Yeah, they don't mind the fridge at all. They grow readily at low temperatures. So here's the real dilemma. If you artificially extend the shelf life of a chilled product, you're actually giving those sneaky cold-tolerant bacteria the one thing they need most: time. A food product might have wonderfully safe, low levels of bacteria right after processing, but if you tell consumers they can keep it in the fridge for a month, those pathogens now have 30 uninterrupted days to multiply into highly dangerous, unsafe levels. Finally, Section 6, Nutrient Loss Over Time, the Hidden Casualty. You see, food deterioration isn't always about things going bad, smelling weird, or making you sick. Sometimes it's about a product silently losing the very nutritional value that makes it food in the first place. Shelf life calculations must also factor in the chemical stability of vitamins and minerals. Over time, these nutrients naturally degrade, even if the food itself remains completely biologically safe to eat. The food safety standards are incredibly strict on this. They state directly, a use-by date is needed to indicate the point in time at which the nutrient levels will be less than the levels stated on the label. This means if a manufacturer prints on the box that their cereal gives you 100% of your daily vitamin C, that statement legally has to be true on the very last day of its shelf life. So that use-by date isn't just a safety warning, it's literally an expiration date on a nutritional promise. And this isn't just about truth in advertising either. It has very serious health implications. Maintaining accurate nutrient levels over the entire shelf life is absolutely critical for foods that serve as a major nutritional source for vulnerable groups. Think about infant formula or specialized medical meal replacements. If those nutrients fade before the use-by date, the consumer isn't just getting a slightly stale product. They're being quietly deprived of essential, life-sustaining nutrition. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. The next time you grab a product in the grocery store and check that simple little use-by date stamped on the cardboard, will you look at it the same way? Will you think about the intricate hurdle technology, the silent battle against heat-resistant spores and cold-tolerant pathogens, and the race to preserve fading nutrients? The science of shelf life is a highly engineered marvel, and it's happening right inside your kitchen cabinets. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and remember to keep asking the big questions about the everyday things around you.